Hello everyone, Books with Banks back again, and today I wanted to make some more Outlander content. As much as I love both Diana Gabaldon's Outlander books as well as the Starz adaptation, I feel like my reading and watching of the series is going at a pretty slow pace, and I rarely get to talk about how much fun I'm having with this story. So instead of waiting to finish Drums of Autumn, Book 4, I thought I'd make a video now that I'm halfway through, just over halfway through. I will be light on spoilers at first, and then I'll give the signal when I switch over to my more spoiler-filled thoughts. Also, if you haven't already, it would mean a lot if you could please like and subscribe. Thank you. So, my Outlander journey so far, just to give a little bit of a background if you haven't watched my other Outlander content. You should know that I first came to this series through the TV show during those dark days of COVID lockdown. Not that COVID isn't still scary. It sure is, but back in in the summer of 2020, at the beginning of the pandemic, I started speaking and, kind of flirting with a young woman on a dating app. Turns out her name's Jen, and now we're getting married in March 2024. Yay, so it's a kind of fun love story. But one of the things we talked about early on, getting to know each other, before we even met face to face, was Outlander. I had never watched the show, and she and her mom were big fans, so she and I kind of virtually watched the first few seasons together. She was rewatching, of course, and then eventually I started hanging out with Jen in person, and we'd continue to try and get me caught up on Outlander, watching with her and her mom as well. I watched the first 5 seasons of the show with them, and then I started reading the books back in early 2022, so about a year and a half ago now. So here we are, a year and a half later, and I've read the first 3 novels. That's Outlander, Dragonfly and Amber, and Voyager. I've read 1 short story, 3 novellas, and 1 of the Lord John side series novels. And now I find myself halfway through the 4th book of the main series. For those of you who watched the show, the books up to this point at least have been incredibly faithful. So halfway through book 4 is very similar, very close to being halfway through season 4. Without spoiling things too much, for those interested in the series overall, I'll try to describe this book vaguely enough with some broad descriptors to give you all a sense of what the series' whole strengths are. So in Drums of Autumn, we have our protagonists making their way through some of the southern colonies in late 1760s colonial America. Our main duo of characters, our main couple, they're slowly but surely finding their footing and figuring out the tense political situation of living in the Americas, surrounded by indigenous communities, British soldiers, and early bands of resistance to those soldiers. Upsetting subject matters like slavery and the oppression and colonization of indigenous peoples. These kinds of things are central to the historical fiction parts of this story. But on a more personal level, there's a lot about the ghosts of our pasts, be those people or memories that we've left behind, what have you. There's also a good deal about family and children, past, present, future, illegitimate, adopted, and so on. But yes, the future. So these are time travel novels after all. And having watched the show, I know what's coming up soon here in this book. Not only do we have one storyline set in the 1760s, but there's another storyline going on right now in the 1960s and early 1970s. And that story's focusing on the descendants of our main characters and what these descendants are doing as far as historical research goes. Also, the 20th century characters, there's a lot about their kind of romantic situation. At the halfway point where I'm at, I haven't really gotten to the part where the 20th century character's storyline really kicks off, but I'm very excited to get there. All in all, it's a wonderful story, weaving deep themes and romance into what seems to be a painstakingly well-researched glimpse into 1760s colonial life and what it would have been like for an immigrant family to settle down and start trying to make their way in the American colonies. For those more interested in watching the show, I really do encourage you to at least give the books a try. There's so much character work Gabaldon accomplishes through character inner monologue, and despite the excellent performances in the show, you still get a much richer understanding of who these people are through Gabaldon's descriptions. Gabaldon also will have these beautiful passages that are so simple, but they're beautiful in how they articulate maybe slightly abstract ideas. For instance, there's a point in this book, the protagonist mentions that nightfall is upon them, but then starts thinking to herself about how night and darkness don't really fall per se, but rather the darkness and night all rises up from the earth, filling in all the spaces in the trees and up to and above the horizon, all the way up to the sky. If you're a fan of rich and creative descriptions like those, and an author who definitely takes her time exploring characters' thoughts and motivations, but also takes her time to fill out the scenery of her setting with such descriptive language, then please, please, please give these books a try. All right, now we're going to go into a spoiler. So thanks for watching, but if you don't want anything about the series spoiled, proceed no further. Anyway, okay, spoilers for my thoughts on this book and the series so far. This is the book, if it's anything like the show, where Roger and Brianna become almost as important as Jamie and Claire. Brianna being the daughter of Jamie and Claire, but born in the 20th century and living in the 1960s. And she and Roger are researching what's going on with her parents 2 centuries prior. And this duo, these two characters of Roger and Bree, are, in my opinion, just somewhat less likable than Jamie and Claire. I really love the part of the show where Bree first travels back, and then Roger follows her back in time. And then we're following their journeys through Scotland, across the sea, and eventually to North Carolina. I love that section of the show, of the story that we got there, but I'm not quite there yet in the book, so I can't really speak to how much I'll enjoy that when we get there. I'm expecting to enjoy it quite a bit. All I've seen of Roger and Bree so far are their kind of awkward interactions, often centering around either researching what happened to Claire after she went back the second time, or these scenes are about how much Roger is in love with Bree. But here's the thing about Roger. I find him grating at times. We get several of his inner monologues and opinions on the appearances of women in his life, how attractive but annoying and overbearing his housekeeper is, for instance. He also thinks to himself about how beautiful Bree is all the time. He also thinks about how beautiful Bree's mother Claire is, and often he's thinking to himself these things about stuff like, Bree's breasts, her butt, and so on. And she's not the only character he frequently observes in this sort of objectifying kind of way. Now, don't get me wrong, some of that's fine. Obviously, objectification isn't fine. Appreciating someone's beauty, that's fine. But I feel like it's just a lot with Roger. And I suspect this is intentional. He is a younger man with very little experience, anything really, and I'm guessing Gabaldon is using this to show us how immature he is at this earlier point in the story, so then that his growth across the remaining novels will be more meaningful. Other examples of his immaturity, he seems a bit possessive at times of Bree, and it seems like he can be pretty judgmental, and he's judging her for maybe living a more sexually free lifestyle than he does, or that he would want for her. And he, there's a scene where he's professing his love for her. He's just proposed to her, but then he's holding her firmly and forcing a kiss on her, saying that he'll only sleep with her if they're getting married because anything else would be wrong, which is a subtle way of criticizing her for wanting to sleep together, not getting married. And it's just kind of an icky, uncomfortable feeling. I don't think he really understands a lot about relationships at this point. I think he has a lot to learn. I have every confidence in Gabaldon's ability to take him on a journey where he'll be able to learn these things and where he'll be able to grow into a more confident and considerate man. But where we're at right now, he still kind of gives me that ick, yeah. All that to say, I do enjoy his chapters because I really like this part of the story. It's just all through his point of view. Maybe I would like a few more scenes already from Bree's point of view. We've only gotten a couple chapters like that. I'd love to get more from her perspective, and I'm hoping to throughout the rest of this novel. And I hope this doesn't sound too cruel, but I honestly can't wait for some upcoming horrible things to happen to Roger, to be able to better compare how the show handled Roger's growth with how Gabaldon writes about his growth originally. So even though this book might be recognized as the point in the story where those two characters, where Bree and Roger, take a more central, important role, they've probably together at this point had less than 70 pages of this, of the like 540 pages I've read. The story really up to the halfway point has been still the continuation of Jamie and Claire's adventure, getting to the plot of land that they'll now start to turn into Fraser's Ridge. And while when watching the show and reading the books, I did enjoy Lollybrock's home and the Scotland and France settings, the American colonies and Fraser's Ridge, that all really kind of caught me by surprise as being my favorite of these settings. I love this location and I love this part of the story, and I love that I finally kind of caught up to the part in the books when Gabaldon was originally introducing the setting and all of this to her fans. So the beginning of this book really does feel like a big transition. It's sort of relaxing because a lot of the chaotic travel and action of the previous book, Voyager, has all been wrapped up, but we're still on a quest. We're still in the sweaty, mosquito-ridden Georgia and Carolina colonies. Then there's this tense mini-story section of Jamie and Claire's life with Aunt Jocasta. I love this character of Jocasta and how she's operating as a powerful woman, managing her estate. She's powerful, she's from a different generation, and she's also struggling with being blind. But Gabaldon always keeps us thinking about the historical differences between not only our time and the 1760s, but also Claire's time, the mid-20th century and the 1760s. And Gabaldon puts front and center a lot of the time, I think, Claire's thoughts on slavery and horror at witnessing slavery firsthand and seeing such a great person like Jocasta acting as an owner of slaves. I really enjoy how Gabaldon uses these tense historical differences to get us thinking more critically about these characters and what horrible things might have been accepted as normal back then. Great stuff. It's one of the main things I love about the series. This heavy moral conversation of the book does shift, I think, however, away a little bit from slavery when Jamie and Claire go further west and start to build up Fraser's Ridge. They start having numerous run-ins with the Native Americans out there. There's even this brilliant conversation early on in the book where Jamie is telling Claire about how scary the savage and uncivilized natives are, and she starts out trying to convince him otherwise. She tries to start a conversation about how these more ubiquitous racist attitudes in the 1700s are bad, but ultimately Claire pauses here and decides, I think, to more patiently and subtly let their upcoming interactions with indigenous peoples unfold. In other words, whereas a younger Claire who didn't know Jamie as well might have fought him more immediately on this point, this wrong-headed kind of notion, now Claire trusts that Jamie is a good man, and she trusts that if and when he does come into contact with indigenous people, he'll be able to determine for himself how racist and illogical the kind of fear-mongering about, savages has actually been. And sure enough, that seems to be playing out the way Claire expected at the point where I'm at. Also, I can't talk about this book without mentioning little Ian, or young Ian, easily my favorite kind of new member of their new family unit. Ian has suffered quite a lot so far, and really just kind of over the course of the last half of book 3. And now he's at this great moment of growth in his life, where he's becoming a man, and all the while he's thrust into all of these unique and diverse and fascinating scenarios. He's helping to build a house in this whole kind of Fraser's Ridge. He's also working closely with the Native Americans and becoming a fast friend to the people, but also a fast learner of their culture. I love Ian. And I think in the books and the show, he's a great addition to the story, and I can't wait to get further into how Gabaldon wrote some aspects of his story that I'm familiar with and looking forward to with what I remember from the show. Other great things about this book so far, Lord John and Willie just showed up, and the measles outbreak is wreaking havoc on everyone, including the indigenous communities. But yes, so with Claire missing Brianna, Ian sort of being an adopted son, Willie showing up as Jamie's illegitimate son, and Fergus and Marcelly finally coming up to join them at the Ridge, I think Gabaldon is really using this book to highlight all of the actual and kind of sort of children in Jamie and Claire's lives. And Gabaldon is introducing this as a big point because, from my understanding, from here on out, she's going to be exploring the experiences of both of these different generations throughout the remaining novels. And, of course, throughout the Revolution. So, all in all, I'm loving this book. Dragonfly and Amber, book 2, is still probably my favorite, but depending on how Gabaldon writes about Bree and Roger coming back, how she continues to develop Roger, and how a certain catastrophic misunderstanding plays out in this book compared to how it played out and how it happened in the show, I'd say this stands a chance of possibly dethroning book 2 as my favorite, but I think this one will at least be a solid second place. Like if I did a ranking of the series, which I might do sometime after I finish this book. But yeah, have you read the Outlander books or watched any of the show? If so, please let me know what you thought about this book in particular down below. Let me know what you thought about my thoughts on this book. If you watched the show, if you're enjoying the show, maybe if you're at an earlier book, if you're enjoying that as well. Let me know anything you'd like to share down below, all Outlander related. And thank you all so much for watching. Have a great day. Bye.